I want to take the time to note something that I don't think many people notice about my generation, being Gen Z. Like other generations, we were told that we could be anything we wanted to be. And many of us walked away from this lesson in two different ways. The first, and I think the one that more people are familiar with, are the people who took this as seriously as possible. They sought to push the boundaries of both culture and just in general tradition, continuing a process of deconstructing pretty much any limit that was put on them, both in our relationship to each other, into technology, that our traditional formulations of these things have been broken down by this process. The second has responded by essentially saying, I know that's not true. I know I can't be anything I want to be. It really doesn't make sense. And thus, when they're hearing this from their parents, there's a certain response of, I need to find a person who's actually willing to do that role. It's this half of Gen Z I want to just kind of delve into and look at some recent movements in the culture that I think not too many people might be super familiar with. One major sign of this movement is the shift in traditional institutions. The Catholic Church and Orthodox Church are seeing a large movement of young people to the most authoritative parts of these traditions. For example, because of Vatican II, the Latin Mass has been de-emphasized for a variety of reasons. However, this type of Mass is seeing a great influx of young people. I have friends who've traveled over an hour and a half just to sit in the Latin Mass. I'm not going to try to make an explanation here on why this is the case, or to even say that it's a good thing. But it's important to note nonetheless, as well as with all these things. On the internet, more specifically, it's important to note the Orthobro movement. This is really the movement that kind of moved me to make this video in the first place. If you haven't seen these young men and women, I imagine you soon will. I think they're not slowing down. These Orthobros are extremely well versed in internet culture and are generally internet savvy overall. The fact that so many young people are beginning to identify with one of the most ancient and esoteric branches of Christianity, that being Eastern Orthodox, probably should strike us as unexpected. Relatively well known for their participation in comment sections and for being a little rowdy. There's been kind of accusations thrown around about LARPing has been one kind of thing that's been brought up a lot. And this idea of you're not actually going to a church. You're taking on an identity that you don't fully participate in. And so what claim do you actually have to this? And I think this kind of theory of mine, I think, fits in pretty well, that they're desperate for something authoritative, something to stand behind, something to serve as a firm foundation. And sometimes when people are in those situations, they use that as an excuse to bully other people, which isn't right, but they were unstable and now they have stability. I think that's just something to take note of. All of this coincides with the explosion of popularity that Jordan Peterson underwent in the last half decade.
The consequences of not saying what was true. It's like whatever hell you might fall into by opening your mouth when you have something to say that isn't popular, it's nothing like the hell that you're going to envelop yourself in if you lose control of your own tongue and mind. And like I said, in my clinical practice, I never saw anyone get away with anything even once. You need to be afraid of the right thing, and you should be afraid of contaminating your soul with deceit. That's what you should be afraid of. That will definitely do you in, and I know exactly how. What happens is, garbage in, garbage out. You'll fill your head with nonsense and no one will call you on it except you, but you can still that voice if you try hard enough. You just wait until you get in real trouble.
He led the charge for more and more influencers to address the societal problems that had previously had no voice, and led to a reemergence and accepting of religious thinking in the public square. Put some names out here. Chris Williamson.
Have you been keeping abreast, or have you noticed this trend?
Ryan Holiday.
The Stoics say you need to stop doing these 5 things.
Jocko Willink.
When you get bothered, you're going to get more insults because you gave them what they wanted.
All of these people owe just as much, in my opinion, to Jordan Peterson as they do Joe Rogan for the amount of influence and cultural movement that kind of carried them to where they are. But Joe Rogan also has played an enormous role in this shift as well.
Anyone's going to accuse pizza of being like the healthiest thing in the world. This looks awesome.
That does look awesome. You want a plate, Jamie?
All right, sick.
Let's go.
This is awesome.
Oh, yeah.
But that's another video entirely. The words I would use to describe this movement are a consideration of individual responsibility and cultivation as the first step to cultural change. In this sense, there's a great similarity to Stoic tradition, and this also led another explosion of the Stoic movement, especially in online spheres, as a set of practices and beliefs to encourage self-cultivation. Ryan Holiday is one of these kind of people who came out of nowhere, seemingly, but fell in love with the Stoic tradition, and that's his thing. Like, he just talks about that all day and he writes books about it.
The Stoics say you need to stop doing these 5 things.
And it's important to notice that, like, young people are paying attention. If we consider the Petersonian movement as a religion, then we are now led to the heresy of the Manosphere. The Manosphere, you might not have heard of it. It kind of grew out of this men's rights, red pill movement, and ultimately ended up with this name. It was made famous by the likes of Andrew Tate.
And most people live their lives as worms. Most of you are worms. You don't do anything important. You're just living in your shit life, living your little dirt, just sitting there wriggling, hoping an eagle doesn't come along to fuck you up. And if an eagle did come along, you couldn't even defend yourself. A worm has no claws. It hasn't even got, like a skunk can spray smelly piss or something. A worm has zero defensive mechanism. A worm is absolutely and utterly useless. I've never heard of a story of valor that involves a worm. People use animals as insults. They'll say you're a bitch, which is a female dog. I don't think a female dog's that insulting to be. I know female dogs. You can have a female police dog that will charge at bullets, or you can have a fire dog that will run in a burning building. What's so wrong about being a female dog? A dog can do something. Being a female worm would be much worse. Are there even female worms? Are worms so shit that they don't even have genders? I'm about to do research in the middle of a Tate speech for the first time in my life.
And a YouTube channel by the name of Fresh and Fit.
Well, I come from a background where the men have multiple women.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Women. So I don't think monogamy is not that's a lie. Like most guys don't want to be monogamous to one girl. Even your guy right now, he probably wants multiple girls.
Listen, man. Probably.
W. Andrew.
But you don't know.
But yeah, I see what you tried to do there. Yeah. Nice try.
There's a few others, of course, in this area, but those are kind of the 2 big ones that I feel like I'm always running into online, or I did in the last kind of year, where Peterson sought to give men a way of living that would lead them to finding meaning in life through responsibility. The Manosphere sought to find ways to give men instruction on how to get what they wanted, namely sex with attractive women, money, power, and a wife that would be loyal and take care of them and their children. This movement seems to have taken a different way of dealing with authority, where Peterson's side seems to be more about authority as a burden, that with power comes responsibility. In the Manosphere, there's a certain sense of egoism and objectivism, that the strong have the right to say what is right and wrong, and that's what ought to decide morality. The criticism of the current world itself is that it's ruled by weak men and women, and they ought to be you ought to be strong enough to kind of stand up to them, is kind of the Manosphere argument. And What it feels like it really breaks down to is almost Ubermensch philosophy. However, the Manosphere didn't last forever. It actually was relatively short-lived. By the end of it, Andrew Tate compared the movement that he had led and trailblazed to feminism, one of his greatest opponents who would rail about all the time. As time went on, the Manosphere completely abandoned any sense of men's responsibility to care for families, to develop them even. There was a meme passed around for a while where a somewhat famous member of the Manosphere movement instructed young men to put off starting a family for the purpose of climbing the corporate ladder, and to get a vasectomy so that sex would be consequenceless, and there would be no threat to the economic prosperity. Tate correctly identified these as the exact things that he and others criticized most in the modern feminist movement. This marked the end of the Manosphere in the spotlight, but it marked a great shift towards another religion. By far, this has been the most interesting shift I've seen. I would be called out repeatedly if I didn't mention the movement of many young people to Islam. The public conversions of people like Andrew Tate and Sneeko have shown a desire for authoritative religion that feels strong.
Well, I think a lot of people who've been following me for a while understand that I've been very respectful of Islam for a long time.
Yeah, sure.
I was born in a Christian country. I was raised as a Christian, and I've always been very respectful of Islam, and it's become more and more obvious to me and more pertinent that Islam is the last religion on the planet.
The reason that I converted is Allah is the one true God. That's the one, that's the creator of the universe, the creator of everything. Jesus was there to spread his message. Muhammad was the prophet. And then we are all his people. We are all his creation. And that just makes the most sense to me. Because like, what's the best explanation for why the world exists? There must be a creator. But instead of like a human half body eating.
Yeah, that is a little confusing.
That's why I like, it's just there's one creator. And also they're really strict and on their beliefs on masculinity and femininity, on the differences between men and women and our roles and what we should be doing. I went to the mosque and I asked him when we were leaving, I'm like, why are there no women here? Like, I never thought about them before. I was in the mosque and like, I never noticed, I'm like, there's no women here. And then I asked him that question. He looked at me like I was stupid. Like, they're at home. They're cooking. Like, why would they don't need to, they pray at home. They don't need to be here. This is the men's job to go out and provide and to go, and the division between men and women is extremely important, respected, and it's ingrained in the culture. That's not the same in any of these other religions.
The common argument you will tend to hear online is that Islam is a religion that does not compromise on masculine virtues, where Christianity has been the butt of jokes for years in the culture. Islam does not have much tolerance for this treatment. This, in my mind, shows the most extreme end of this Gen Z movement for authority, especially when we are reminded that the literal meaning of Islam is submission. The reason I find this specific group to be so extreme is because of the crossover with the Tate movement. The seeming strategy is to bring together the hyper-masculine and questionable content about women that Tate espouses, and to try to find a religious framework to ground it. To close this out, I'd like to consider some of the changes that we have seen that might be unexpected. There seems to be a perception that the mainline church in America espouses the same cultural values as we see on the news, except the church just lags behind a few years. This is deeply unattractive to young people for several reasons. For the first group we mentioned originally, that seeks to continue the postmodern deconstructive process, why would we want to be behind the times? If we know X is evil, then why would we wait to condemn it? Political organizations provide an alternative for these individuals, as they can be more dynamic and are up to date on the project compared to the slower moving religious institutions. On the other hand, if these young people are looking for deep tradition and don't want a church chasing after the culture, they'll be disappointed. I don't claim to say that all of Gen Z falls into these two categories, but I do think we need to consider that these are two large movements, and we need to do some processing on how we engage with this youngest generation. For many, there's a deep desire for something greater to provide purpose, and deconstruction, by definition, cannot provide this. In my mind, the only path forward that could unite the two is for both to understand that the world has changed and the traditions of the past cannot provide us with everything we need. Modernity and postmodernity cannot be ignored. We also will need to recognize that the deconstruction project is over, and reconstruction will need to begin. This resurrection is not going to be an easy one, but it's the only hope I can imagine. Leave a comment, and I'll see you next Saturday.